Hey, what's new and exciting? It's Kevin O'Shaughnessy here, and in this video I'm going to talk about how to get control of your picking hand. So if you're new to the channel, first of all, welcome. I do videos on guitar technique, songwriting, and music production. So if that sounds like it's at all interesting to you, please feel free to explore. My goal is to help kind of clear away some of the chaos, right? There's a ton of information on the internet. Where do you start? What are the other guys not telling you? My hope is that I can give you that information so that you can get to doing the things that you want to do a little quicker and with a bit more confidence. So if that sounds useful to you, by all means subscribe and remember to hit the notifications bell so that you can be kept up to date on all of my latest content. So, getting into the picking hand. I've got a couple of videos out on the fretting hand. I'll put some links so that you can find those as well. But the picking hand, the guitar, is kind of a complex system. We use one hand to find the notes, and we use the other hand to actually make those notes sound. And I don't know if you fall into this category, but I've certainly seen a number of my students over the years, they focus an awful lot on the fretting hand, but they don't pay any attention to the picking hand, and they wonder why there's no fluidity in their playing. When they go from lick to lick or moving from chords to solos or whatever, they just can't quite grab it. And a lot of times I find it's because they ignore the picking hand. So what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about how the hand works, how we use the picking hand to get the sounds that we want. So a little bit of vocabulary first, okay? We're going to talk about patterns of movement. So with the wrist, when it's straight like this, we say that it's neutral. I've used this term in a couple of other videos. When it's straight, it's neutral. And it's got two pairs of motion that it can do. It can flex and extend, right? So down and up, and it can deviate left and right. And it's the combination of the two motions that allows us to draw circles. Pretty cool, right? The forearm can do two different motions. It can supinate and pronate, okay? So these are the two different directions of rotation. Supinating is up, pronating is down. Most players, from what I've seen, tend to use deviation to get the pick across the strings. And a lot of times they will incorporate a forearm rotation when strumming big chords. So we've also got something else to consider. Each of these motions can also become an orientation. So for example, if I'm swinging my wrist from side to side like this, I'm deviating my wrist. If I hold it, that's an orientation. This is a deviated wrist. This is a flexed wrist. This is an extended wrist. This is a supinated orientation. This is a pronated orientation. Most players will have they'll have some sort of a natural inclination. They'll have some way that feels very comfortable to them or intuitive to hold the pick. A lot of players I find tend to have a somewhat supinated orientation. This creates what's becoming known as a downward pick slant. This has a very specific mechanical advantage in that when you are picking phrases, your pick will become clear of the strings on an upstroke. So anytime, as long as I've got an even number of notes on a string, I can play using this supinated orientation, and I won't have any trouble clearing the strings whatsoever. Right? So those are 6 notes on a string. Now if I have a more pronated orientation, my pick is going to clear the strings after every downstroke. Nothing wrong with that. It's just a different mechanical advantage. So if I start a pattern with an even number of notes on an upstroke, I'm going to clear the string after every downstroke. Right? Or if I were to do that with the simple pentatonic and I started on an upstroke. Notice how my pick comes away from the strings after every downstroke. Now a couple of things that you might use the rotation for, like I said, are strumming big chords. I find a lot of times in my playing, I tend to pronate my arm on the downstroke and supinate it on the upstroke. Now I don't put a great deal of thought into that, and I don't recommend that you do either. I let momentum do most of the work, and these motions sort of happen like that. Now, a more extreme case that you might see of this sort of alternating supination and pronation would be in something like Eddie Van Halen's Tremolo technique. If you've ever seen this on video or live, right? He uses this very, very rapid alternation of supination and pronation to get that even tremolo effect. It's really cool to see. So here's two things you can do right now. Number one, I'm going to include a link in the description, and you'll probably find a little button floating around if you're watching this on your computer. There's a video by a guy named Troy Grady. He's got a show called Cracking the Code where he's done some exhaustive research into picking technique of all kinds of great players. But there's one video in particular where he discusses this exact thing, the motions of the picking hand, that is very insightful and also very entertaining. He's got a lot of great animation that shows this stuff in more detail. So go check that out to get a little bit more information on all of this stuff. And then the next thing that I want you to do is sit down with your guitar and start paying attention to your picking hand. Which way do you naturally feel like you want to hold the pick? Is it a somewhat supinated orientation? Is it a pronated orientation? Do you use wrist deviation in order to get the pick across the strings? It's not a question of right or wrong. It's a question of which mechanical advantage feels more natural to you. When you know what that advantage is, you can craft your licks more easily, and you can alter the licks of other players. Anything that you might be having trouble with, you can alter it to fit your mechanical advantage. You might find that you can play licks from one guitar player really, really easily, but another guitar player is a struggle, even if the rhythms themselves aren't much different. If they're playing equally fast or they're playing equally complex passages, but one is easy and one is hard, it could be that the two players use two different types of picking hand orientation, and you're going to want to figure that out to make those licks easier to play. So I hope you found that useful. If you did, please remember to subscribe and hit that notifications bell. If you've got any questions, hit me up in the comments. I'll be more than happy to answer them. In the meantime, I'm Kevin O'Shaughnessy, and I'll see you in the next video.